Don't let the Zelle dream turn into the Zelle nightmare because you fell for one of the many Zelle scams. This handy payment app makes it easy to transfer money from person to person simply by using an app on your phone, or as Lynn has pointed out to me, on a desktop or tablet. But without the proper care controls, this app can turn into a real nightmare. Recent stories in the press reveal how the app was used to scam college students and others out of thousands of dollars. Let's take a look at some of the safety precautions every Zelle user should be using to ensure they don't get Zelle scammed. Stick around until the end when we share an often overlooked safety precaution. Lynn, can you share some tips with our audience?
Oh, absolutely, Mary. I think the first one that so many people are not aware of, they think that their bank, if they are scammed, they think their bank will cover
Mhm.
all the losses. And that simply is not true. It's not like, say, a credit card world where you can dispute something and most likely get your money back.
Mm.
Now I would say though that banks are responding to, shall we call it, public pressure
Bad
to,
press.
yes, exactly, to do something about
Yeah,
it, but that doesn't guarantee anything. So do know that if you fall for something, your bank may not reimburse you.
right, right.
And then moving on from there, I think one of the biggest things too is you don't want to be fooled when you get a call or a text that appears to be coming from your bank.
Mhm.
I think, have all learned, maybe the hard way, that these fraudsters can actually spoof these phone numbers. And so they
Mhm.
might look legitimate, but they
Right.
absolutely are not. And then, in fact, there was another scam involving Zelle where the fraudster was actually posing as the person's utility company. So
Jesus.
there's another one. So it's not just fake calls from your bank. It could really be any entity that
Mhm.
ultimately leads to a Zelle scam. And so all of these things really mean you need to be very aware and on guard, at all times.
Mhm.
If we want to go to tip number 3, that would really pertain to legitimate Zelle usage. So, again, us doing these podcasts, it's not because we don't like Zelle. I, in fact, am
Mhm.
a Zelle user. But if you're going to use Zelle, you need to know how to protect yourself
Right.
and then how to do so carefully. So, careful is the name of the game here on tip number 3. You want to, when you're sending a payment out, you want to be verifying, double checking the appropriate email or phone number of the intended recipient. I think it would even be wise to type it out, double check it, and then copy and paste it perhaps into the app or into your bank's website that you're using to access Zelle, just so you don't miskey anything, because these payments are irrevocable. So once you make a mistake, that mistake really ends up being on you. So be very careful when you're making real payments. And then tip 4, many, I think, even of your readers have even called out and mentioned this one, to use perhaps a separate account. So
Mhm.
establish a different banking account
Mhm.
in which you are solely using that for Zelle purpose, or even Venmo if you're a Venmo user as well.
Mhm.
Then at least you can keep just a minimal amount of money in there. And it's not like your main banking account that perhaps
Mhm.
has a larger sum of money that you're putting at risk. So that's another consideration, so you can limit your losses if you end up getting scammed.
You know what, Lynn? What I see with this, it's the same thing we see in so many other frauds, so many other payment frauds. And crooks are really innovative when they find ways to
Absolutely.
scam people.
Well, they're completely ahead of us, really ahead
Mhm.
of us law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, because we
Uh,
don't think that way.
Well, right. Because I think, when the Zelle scams were first making the news, most of them did involve the fraudster spoofing a person's
Right.
bank. But as I just mentioned, there are other cases and it may not come out that way. So
Right.
you're right. The fraudsters are definitely ahead of the game here.
So, Lynn, we charged right in because we wanted to share tips, but it occurs to me you haven't told the audience a little bit about yourself and recharged education.
Sure. So let me be brief here. I launched Recharged Education back in 2014. I primarily serve the commercial card community, both the end user organizations as well as providers. But over the years, I have broadened my focus or
Mhm.
scope. And as you know, we talk about real time payments and things like Zelle and whatnot in that arena. So
Mhm.
I offer different consulting services, educational materials, and so forth. So thank you,
And
Mary.
And Lynn is going to be with us in a few weeks when we have AP Technology Week. She'll be joining several of the panels, and we'll have some information about that in the show notes. Okay, so Lynn, I bet you have some more tips for us.
Oh, we could talk about this for a long time. I think most people do this, but just in case, if you are logged in to whether it be the Zelle app or you're logged into your bank through which you're accessing Zelle, whatever the case might be, or let's even throw Venmo into the mix here, log out of these apps when you are not using them. Now, I know they probably kick you out after a certain amount of time, but you don't want just any gaps where if someone else gets a hold of your phone or gets into your phone. Again, I know maybe this sounds a bit far-fetched, but really just pay attention to what you're logged into via your mobile device, and do log out every time just to minimize that. And then even going back to a moment when we talked about paying people. Now, be very careful, not only, when you're making a legitimate payment, but even prior to that, know exactly who you are paying. I would never want to pay or initiate a payment to someone that I've never met, someone that I don't know very well, even if they're likable or charming. And what I mean by that is there was a scam in the media not long ago about a college student who was subleasing her apartment. Long story short, she met someone who appeared to be legitimate through a legitimate source. That person even sent their ID. It all seemed very up and up. And at this point, Zelle was not involved. It wasn't until that potential leasee was sending a check to pay for that apartment, and then later on said, I really need that money back. I need it for XYZ reason. Can you just Zelle me a payment and then we'll take care of it, in the future? So the student did that. Well, the check ended up being a fraud, or it bounced. And basically then that person lost money because she turned around and made that Zelle payment. So maybe the sub tip here would be, even if you receive a check from someone, you receive a payment that you've deposited, you've cashed it, it all seems fine, it can still get recalled. You might be depositing it faster than the time limit for them to recall it. So be very, very careful there. And then I should also point out that when you are in the app or you're in your banking site, they, I'm sure, give a lot more tips. Do pay attention to what the app or your bank is saying about Zelle usage. I know through my own bank, when I log in and want to make a Zelle payment, it's saying, are you sure? And consider this, and read our security tips. So I would say just stay in tune to what your bank is telling you every time. There might be something new that you weren't aware of, and it's just good to stay informed. So it's being on top of everything, knowing who you're dealing with, being careful when you're making payments. The list goes on.
All righty. If you like this episode, please give us a thumbs up. And if you loved it, please subscribe. We produce new content for the channel 3 times a week. Tuesdays and Thursdays are devoted to a payment and accounts payable issues, and Saturdays are reserved for Wordle. Lynn, do you have one last tip?
I think the overarching theme here is not to panic. That is, when you get what appears to be legitimate communication, although it probably isn't, about someone breaking into your bank accounts, or in the case of that utility company, the fact that your electricity is about to be shut off, anything that would normally arise some panic within you, don't panic. These are the situations that turn out many a times to be a scam or some kind of fraud. So if you get such communication, do independently verify, not by calling a number or responding to the communication. You want to separately contact your bank through the number that you have from your bank, or separately contact your utility company, or just whomever might be contacting you that is putting forth a scary scenario and saying, basically, if you don't do a Zelle payment, something bad will happen. I think if everyone just were to pause and really think about these communications, they can save themselves a lot of heartbreak. But so often these scams catch us off guard, or we're in a hurry, or we're busy, whatever the case may be, and we just want to fix something, when something appears to be wrong. But don't panic. That's the best
Lynn,
thing I
that's
can
like
say.
any other type of fraud. If it's an emergency, it's rush. If they're pushing you, it means that probably you need to take a step back and take another look. because we
Oh,
see
for
that in
sure.
so many of the frauds.
Oh, that's
Lynn,
absolutely.
by the way, did a longer interview with us on Zelle and some of the more common scams and how they work. You can watch it right now using the link that will appear momentarily on YouTube and is in the show notes below. As always, we appreciate those thumbs up, those subscribes, those shares, and those comments.